Welcome everybody for the second part of our online keynote session as part of our program Festivals and Social Cohesion, which is our last training of this year, online training of a series of 4. We have here with us Hajooj Kuka and Hira Nabi, 2 filmmakers. Hajooj is from Sudan and Hira is from Pakistan. Their work has been shown in multiple festivals and organizations worldwide, and especially related to the social impact it has. So I'm really delighted to have you with us today, and I'll hand over to Mike van Graan from South Africa, who will facilitate this conversation.
Great. So when COVID-19 struck and the atelier had to go online, we basically came up with a program that sought to catalyze and I suppose stimulate people who were part of the alumni network, as well as new people who engage in festival making across the world in 3 or 4 different programs. One of them was these kinds of ateliers. Another was to look at hotspots of the world where alumni came from particular countries and regions that happened to be in the news for whatever reason. And because we were building relationships with people who were based there, we focused on those particular areas just to gain insight into what was happening in those parts of the world directly through the people with whom we had relationships. Another area of interest for us was the impact that artists were having on their respective environments. And I suppose tonight's discussion is very much about that, under the broad theme of artists and the impact that they are making on their respective societies. As we said earlier, the whole theme of social cohesion and the introductions that people were engaged in reflected the fact that we as festival makers and as arts practitioners are not islands. We are not operating and delivering in vacuums. The societies of which we are part impact on the work that we make, and in fact our work very much reflects the social conditions in which we find ourselves as well. So we are delighted to have with us 2 artists, as Inga said, 2 filmmakers who engage with their context through the work that they are producing. And so we're going to invite Hira from Pakistan, Hira Nabi from Pakistan, to talk for about 10 minutes or so, after which Hajooj from Sudan will do the same, and then we'll ask a few questions maybe, and then that will be it for the night. So over to Hira to initiate this particular part of our day. Thank you, Hira.
Oh, I was muted. Hi, thank you, Mike. It's nice, and of course, it still continues to be weird to talk to so many people through like these tiny boxes. I was just looking at everybody's little box and seeing that some of you are sitting outside, some of you are indoors. There's different qualities of light that are present. And so much of my work is around light and seeing light that it was this kind of nice little kaleidoscope. So hello, my name is Hira and I'm joining you from Lahore in Pakistan. And it is nighttime for me. So I guess, so I'm not sitting, I'm facing a window, but it's dark outside. Before I begin with sharing my thoughts, I'd like to share a piece of music. So I want to invite all of you to just listen. If you want to close your eyes, do that. If not, that's also fine. But yeah, I'm just going to share this. Okay. That was Kishori Amonkar, a great artist from India. And I like to enter spaces with sound and music. So I thought it might be nice to share something from my part of the world. And also to enter into a space together with sound. I hope that moved you. Her voice moves me to joy and sorrow alike. So for the past several days, I've been thinking about what it may mean to respond to this idea of artists changing the world. And as a slogan, it feels overly ambitious, too laudatory. or perhaps too much like a rallying cry to get behind when demanding more funding for art programs. But what does it really mean? So for the past several days, I've been thinking just that. And I'm not sure if art or artists set out to change the world. I'm not sure that they can. And I realize that that's a funny thing to say while offering my thoughts as part of a keynote address titled Artists Changing the World. I'll start with myself so as to place the personal before the general. I don't know if through my art I aim to change the world. It seems epically ambitious and perhaps an idea destined for failure. Which is not to say that failure isn't important or humbling or very, very instructional and poetically lamentable. But coming back to this idea of artists changing the world, there's some element of greatness in this charge. And I think great art can change a world. Why do we seek out great art? I came across this short text by Claire Atherton from 2018. Claire Atherton is a film editor who famously edited Chantal Akerman's films. She wrote, and I quote, "Sometimes great suffering or great beauty transports us into a state of vulnerability so strong that we no longer feel a separation between ourselves and the world. Our defenses fall away. Our shell disintegrates. We do not know anything anymore. In these moments, we do not hide ourselves from the real. It is there, confronting us, within us, as if our eyes were awakening and we were seeing everything for the first time. The real lies beyond appearances, what comes to us through love or death, when we can no longer escape, when we can no longer protect ourselves." The experience of great art for me is the sum of great emotions. To experience terrible beauty, immense joy, like reliving a great love, being filled with delight, unbearable heartache and despair, and to be provoked into that rush of emotions is the experience of witnessing great art. There is a rawness and a reality to it, which is thrilling and deeply, deeply impacting. Again, I'll go back to Claire Atherton. She writes, "If art can bring about the real, it is only possible by welcoming the elusive, by its willingness to lose itself, by resisting the reassuring temptation of explanation or the comfort of a pre-mediated form. We sometimes expect cinema, and especially documentaries, to be a description of reality, to inform us or to transmit messages. But in the face of information, we are passive. Art does not inform us. It connects us to the world and to ourselves. It frees us, questions us, soothes us." I want to stay with this line. Art connects us to the world and to ourselves. It is so important to find that connection. Without it, I fear that we would be lost. I would be utterly lost. And different forms of art have done that work of connecting for me at different times. During college, it was, and different forms of art have done that for me at different times. In school, I found my way through reading and writing and falling in love with the written word, the spoken word, the sung word. During college, it was image making that allowed me to find expression. I discovered films and I wanted to make them. After college, while simultaneously losing and finding myself in New York, I found meaning and identity through food and cooking. I found science and beauty in creating food and feeding others. and building community, but also very much reconnecting myself with different parts of the world where I had scattered roots in a very sensorial way through the palette. When I returned to Pakistan, it was through learning Kathak and dancing and performing that allowed me to ground myself and reconnect myself to the country that had changed so very much in my absence, and also that I had changed as well. And then afterwards, it was map making and image making and writing and filming all together and all at once during my graduate studies. And then printmaking that healed me through a broken heart and let me knead out my pain and roll it out in a press and find it in the hues that I would coax out of tins of primary color and blacks and whites and some thinner. What I aim to do through my practice is to start a conversation or to engage in pre-existing sets of conversations. What I'd like for art and artists to do is to expand discourse and open up spaces around us that have been closed off. What I love about art is that it allows us to experience unknown sensations. Artworks confront us with bold and new ideas, and also allow us to reimagine the familiar and return us to places in our childhood, or memories of home, or to places and experiences that may have been lost. My art practice has helped me pay close attention to detail. It has made me listen to silence and unpack the layers of what I heard in those moments. It has helped me train my nose to smell out emotions, as well as burnt toast. It has granted me glimpses into the tender realities and struggles of other people's lives. It has allowed me to share confidences and to be shared confidences in turn. I have found solidarity and comfort in odd and bizarre places. I have learned to read land and people in one another. Art allows us to feel. It pushes us to think, yes, but it gives us space to feel, to breathe, to connect to our own heartbeat and those of others around us. And in changing ourselves, in becoming more aware of ourselves and the world around us, which we share with all kinds of human and non-human beings that have evolved over space and time, we can possibly and perhaps find a way to change the world. I want to leave you with, well, I want to share this quote by Deleuze. If we want to grasp an event, we must not show it. We must not pass along the event, but plunge into it. Go through all the geological layers that are its internal history, and not simply more or less distant past. This was part of his writings on cinema, but to me, it is also a lesson in making and receiving images. I'd like to leave you with this poem, which I'm also going to pull up so that you can read it as I kind of go through it. It's called A Worker's Speech to a Doctor by Bertolt Brecht. We know what makes us ill. When we're ill, word says, you're the one to make us well. For 10 years, so we hear, you learned how to heal in elegant schools, built at the people's expense. And to get your knowledge dispensed a fortune, that means you can make us well. Can you make us well? When we visit you, our clothes are ripped and torn, and you listen all over our naked body. As to the cause of our illness, a glance at our rags would be more revealing. One and the same cause wears out our bodies and our clothes. The pain in our shoulder comes, you say, from the damp, And this is also the cause of the patch on the apartment wall. So tell us then, where does the damp come from? Too much work and too little food makes us weak and scrawny. Your prescription says put on more weight. You might as well tell a fish, go climb a tree. How much time can you give us? We see, one carpet in your flat costs the fees you take from 5,000 consultations. You'll no doubt protest your innocence. The damp patch on the wall of our apartments tells the same story. Okay.
Great. Thank you, Hira, both for your skepticism about the capacity of art and artists to change the world, and yet for giving us clues as to how artists can do exactly that by starting conversations that open up people's minds, that change people, and so contribute to them changing the world. But thank you very much for that very elegant provocation. Hajooj, over to you.
Hi, everybody. Sorry, am I clear? Everybody sees me? Okay. So yeah, I'm just gonna talk from my experience and some of the things that I've been going through and the changes we've been part of. So I'm from Sudan. I don't know if you guys followed it. We've been having a revolution, and we had a military Islamic dictatorship that in last year collapsed. We got rid of Omar Bashir, one of the biggest dictatorship that existed on earth. So art was a big part of it. So art definitely was a big part of it. So I'm just going to talk a little bit before then what I was doing. So in between 2012 and 2017, I was living in an area called the Nuba Mountains. And this area had a civil war. It was an ongoing civil war. And I was documenting, I created a documentary, and I was daily documenting the things that were in it. So throughout living in this space, the big thing that I noticed, and that's what my film is about, it's about resilience. It's about, I use music and arts and dance to explain the identity in Sudan and how that was part of this, the reason for our ongoing civil war, and how throughout all that we see people who are resilient and whatnot. So the film, although it's about war and people within war, what you see is resilient folks who are dealing with it and living life to the fullest and whatnot. Anyway, so throughout my work, I was always reflecting on three things, and in English somehow they turned out to be all R's, which is reflecting, which I do by creating art, by documenting and creating. And then resilience, which is what seems to always come back to keep on going. You have to be resilient. To be resilient, you have to have collective healing. You have to be flexible and strong. And art, of course, plays a big part of that. Getting together, singing, dancing makes you heal collectively, and being together makes you do that. And the last thing is resisting, because we were resisting something that we knew we need to get rid of. Which was the military Islamic dictatorship of Omar al-Bashir and the system that he created that still exists, but I'll get into that later. But with resisting, you needed a few things. You needed hope, you needed to change the collective consciousness, and you needed empowerment. We need to feel empowered. And to me, art played a role in all of this. Me, myself, I'm an artist, and I'm also an activist. So I actually organize, and I sit with people, and we try to discuss and get people together. And the easiest way to get people together is through art, a festival. Yeah, festival brings people together. Art brings people together. So in Nuba, while I was documenting, and in the beginning, the idea was very simple. I just needed to document stuff, put it on YouTube, so the world sees what's happening in Nuba, so it's not out of this world, so people can see physically what's happening. But what happened? But what was happening while I was creating, there was something very specific to the. There was something very specific to the Sudanese civil war. In the rainy season, it gets really muddy. So the tanks from the army, the Sudanese government can't go. So the war stops. And through that period where the war stopped, which was the rainy season, it'd be about 3 months or so, 3 to 4 months a year. we started like getting together and trying to figure out what can we do. Like we were just hanging out. There was a lot of youth around, and we were like, oh, let's. I was like, you know what? Maybe we can do some theater games. So we started doing these theater games. And in the beginning, it was fun. We do come together, we do theater games. But of course, I'm dealing with a lot of youth, so there's a lot of energy, and they wanted to create stuff. So we started creating skits and showing it in. We'll just whatever event, we'll have events, and we'll come together and we'll show it. And this is in a war zone. So it was this area. So you have an idea of the Nuba Mountain that the rebels controlled. It just has about 500,000 people. So we started doing these skits and going around and stuff. And of course, youth, they got bored really quick. So we started, they wanted to shoot, got excited about it. So we shot a few short films. So we started having short films plus the skits. And this was through a period of 2 to 3 years. So we'd do it and then we'll stop because there's a war, and then we'll come back to it. So it became something we did, and out of that was born something we called mobile cinema, where we would actually go to a town, and there's no electricity or running water. So when we go to a town, we have a captive audience, and everybody in the town would come out. So that'd be between 500 and 1,500 people. So they'll all come out, they'll watch the films we have, between the skits, between my documentary, between different things, and they'll start talking. So the whole town will be there. So they'll have to start discussing the films, themes within the films, and it'll be random and depends on them what theme they pick, but there'll be that discussion, that getting together. And one thing I noticed about having those get-togethers was that people were always, it was a celebration, even if the topics were hard and there was a war and they were discussing like serious things, racism or ethnicity or women oppression or not, they always got together, and there's always a lot of laughter. There's always a lot of solidarity. There's always a lot of feelings. And when you give people a voice to talk after seeing a performance or an art and stuff, suddenly they're all connected, and they have this connected collective consciousness that's connected to something. So the discussions are always deeper, more excited. People who normally don't talk are talking because they're given the vocabulary to talk. So I noticed that. So from that, we started creating a longer piece. Part of it was me getting fed up with smaller pieces, and people just keep coming back and wanting to create more. So we did a feature film. We called it AKASHA, and that included a lot of people, and we shot it in the war zone. And the cast and the crew were 90% were from this war zone. And the idea behind doing the film was actually getting all the people together and getting them to see their lives and see themselves, but also celebrate. So the celebration of life. Anyway, so that was the experience in Nuba, and it was great. It was great. It was a captive audience. We really needed it. The healing aspect of the creation itself, the process of creation, the art was actually beyond actually the art that was created. A lot of these films were not shown outside of Nuba, but the collective healing was very profound. And always, whenever we showed the films, it was always there was always music being played on the ground, skits being done. So there's always this celebration with all these mini festivals that were going on. So fast forward to 2019, the Sudanese revolution. We had the big thing about the revolution. There was all these protests that started in December all the way to April. In April, we had a sit-in where a lot of people came together to the central place in Khartoum. And in that place, suddenly, Sudanese people, as a whole group, discovered art. Suddenly, people were using murals. There was music. People came to the sit-in, but the sit-in was boring. The sit-in was a place where if it was just political, you would go there and you have to stay there we stayed there for 55 days before we were brutally removed. But that's another story. But for 55 days, you need to get people engaged, and the people were engaged through the arts. They were not engaged through the political talk. They were engaged through getting the core of what the revolution was about, creating murals, creating music, getting plays. So suddenly when you come to the grounds of the sit-in, you would think you're in a festival. There's this big festival that's going on, and it's not. Some people actually complained about it, but I actually realized that you need the art to keep going, because otherwise the rhetoric of politicians is not boring. So we need to bring this and keep it going. So art played a big role, and everybody realized it. like murals until now in Sudan are like huge. Suddenly people are like, wow, we have artists, as if we didn't have an art school. But they suddenly discovering all these artists and suddenly finding a value for them that for a long time they didn't find values for these people. And the music at night kept people up all night. It was amazing. Anyway, so fast forward, the army tried to do what happened in Egypt and they destroyed the sit-in. But somehow the resilience, the connectionness, the organization that happened within the sit-in meant that we had enough connection that we managed by the end of that month. The massacre happened in June 3rd. I'm not sure how many people died. Until now, they don't know. I mean, something about 200 to 500. I was beaten up brutally. But after that, we came back in the street and in huge numbers, and the military dictatorship had to give power to the civilians, and they created this partnership between the civilians and the military. So move forward, we were excited. We were like, now is our time. We can create art. We can have our spaces, and we started getting up spaces. We thought the government will now see how important the arts is and help, and we're not. The government didn't. And a few months back, we had a workshop. It was a theater workshop, theater rhythm and move workshop. And we ended up going into jail and this big ordeal, and we ended up getting 2 months in prison. And because, you know, the powers to be, the old regime and the police and whatnot, they still think that art and people, men and women getting together and all that is actually wrong, and it's ethically wrong, and we have to be doing something wrong, and this is not accepted by the society. So that's how they think, the police and the court system, and the whole system has been created to do that, and it hasn't changed yet. And the folks who took over power are actually more busy dealing with them being in power and whatnot, and they're actually resembling the ones who they took power from. To me, it's just reminding me a lot of Animal Farm and whatnot, and that needs to be recreated. But to end, what we're trying to do right now, we're trying to create another festival, because for me it was just like, okay, we need to just keep on moving. Part of it is just like, I guess as an artist, you have this little God complex in you where you're like, you have to create or you die. So we're trying to create the space for people to have art. The thing with creating art, if I'm just trying to create art alone, I would always be fought. So the moment you have to celebrate the art and you have to show people that this is amazing so they can be part of it. And that's when screenings, that's when festivals bring in a big role. It's this, suddenly it moves from art being created for art's sake to art being this whole community thing, and getting people together and getting people to appreciate it, and slowly getting this conversation going on between even different artists. So a big part of what we're trying to do is we're trying in the next 5 years to build the ground, so we have the space for art, and we provide the tools and the knowledge to a diversity of youth, so they can move forward, and actually in 5 years, hopefully, we have this explosion of art that can be both real and creative, and reflecting on us, and a continuation of our revolution. I really noticed through being in Nuba and being Sudan, is actually just the act of creating art is such a resistance, and to me that's the continuation of the revolution, is actually a reflection, and being able to create art is the big thing. And I've noticed that it seems that once you reach that, you would have actually covered a big ground on the hopes and dreams of the community in Sudan and the society. So yeah, so right now we're working on a festival. It's this creation film, one of those 24-hour film festivals where we actually get people together, get them trained a little bit, and get them to create films as teams. And let's see where that happens. And these are just stepping stones to going to the point of, hopefully the revolution will continue, and yeah, art plays a big role in the revolution. And thanks.
Hajooj, thank you very much for sharing that story. I think one of the beauties of this kind of forum is that we do have direct access into countries and situations that we might not have access to otherwise, that are merely headlines on our television screens and the like. So I know we don't have too much time left, but I just wanted to maybe ask a couple of questions of both of you. Hajooj, what is the situation in Sudan now? There's a transitionary power in place. He's supposed to be bringing up a new constitution that will lead to elections. What is the hope for freedom of expression, freedom of creative expression to be guaranteed in the new constitution, so that people like you won't have to go to prison?
Well, the easiest way to explain it is through art. So I did mention Animal Farm by George Orwell, and anybody who read it, it's exactly what's happening. We have people who are from the NGO world who now are heading the government, but they have this partnership with the military, and they're slowly becoming, the pigs are looking like the humans. They're slowly looking alike and how they're thinking, and there's a continuation of this Sudan as a police state. Instead of dismantling the police state, they're actually now using it to control. And what they're thinking more is economics and how to deal with economics, and less with freedoms and freedom of speech and artistic expression and whatnot. So they're really far from that. And the thing about art is it requires two things. It requires, one, to be allowed to do it, so not being thrown in prison. So we are still thrown in prisons. And the other thing is to actually be given value by given access to industry or funding or something. So both of those are actually really far from us. So definitely we don't have that. But what we have is we have the space that we created from the revolution. So although I went into prison, they had to take us out because of the outcry that happened afterwards. So we were released from prison, and also now we have spaces that we didn't have before. So we actually created art. My last films were created through a really bad situation. There was a civil war going on. So now compared to that, it's really easy to create art. So definitely it's better, and revolutions happen in steps. So we're ongoing, but right now the situation is 100 times better, but still really awful.
So in your view, art has made a little contribution to changing your world, or is in the process of making a contribution to changing the world in which you are. Talk to us a little bit about the role of the international community in your situation. What would you like colleagues who might be represented here in festivals from other parts of the world to do in solidarity with what you're doing there?
I mean, when I went to jail, there was this solidarity movement that happened from the filmmakers in the world. And basically my first day, the reason I have this haircut is because they cut it in jail. They just randomly cut your hair. So it's a way of them controlling you and whatnot. So the first 2 days in jail was horrible. I was insulted, cursed at, my haircut, and it was really horrible. But after that, we had this amazing solidarity that happened from the world, from filmmakers, and it was huge. And the second day, like the third day, the people in the prison heard about it, and our situation completely changed. Not just for me, for all the prisoners. Nobody was beating anymore. They became this suddenly like human rights aware, and they were treating everybody really well and treating us especially well, and things completely changed. And then within 2 weeks I was released. So suddenly, definitely solidarity, being in touch, having these campaigns, they definitely work. And they definitely got me out. So that kind of solidarity and being connected as artists, and just screaming that no, art has to be free. Artists need to have space. Just doing that actually helps. And within Sudan, there was an art movement that came together, and we created something called the Manifesto to Protect the Art and Artists. So I feel like when artists come together, regardless of the form, it's really important and it's loud, and artists are scary.
Great. Well, thank you very much for that. And Hira, while you are here as well, just talk to us a little bit about the situation for artists in Pakistan. How supported and how protected are the arts and artists in Pakistan at the moment?
Artists are not supported or protected in the sense that there is very limited infrastructure. So there is limited funding available. both by the state and or by private funding institutions. Artists can be turned a blind eye to as long as they don't talk about the military or talk about people being disappeared or talk about the blasphemy laws. So unfortunately, Pakistan, there's a lot of censorship in Pakistan, but also what it's led to is a lot of self-censorship. So I think at some point after the 80s, during the 90s, 2000s, art and artists stopped being political or stopped making work that was political in a sense, and they're just it sort of was this weird vacuum where art became only perhaps about aesthetics but not about ethics, whereas it's to my mind it's kind of hard to separate the two. More recently, though, there was a film that a Pakistani filmmaker made, which is called Zindagi Tamasha Hai, which was banned because it apparently was insulting religion, and then that led to a long process of it going through different censorship boards and it being cleared, and the filmmaker being persecuted. And we thought we'd never see it, and there were solidarity campaigns where people were kind of coming together to demand that this film be released and in support of the filmmaker. And now, I mean, this is a kind of happy ending because the film is now Pakistan's official submission to the Oscars for the foreign language film category. So that's really nice, and that's great, and it's a win. But the more serious and pressing issue, I think, is one of self-censorship, where artists are so aware of their work when it is slightly politically charged that they're going to be harassed, they're going to come under attack, that there's just an automatic shutting down, which is, I think, far more dangerous because it sort of kills off this idea before it can even begin to be birthed.
Maybe just a final question. What is the state of the festival culture? How many festivals are there and how are they supported?
There's a Biennale in Lahore and there's a Biennale in Karachi, and these are sort of fairly recent events to be organized. So Karachi had its second Biennale last year, late 2019, and Lahore had its second Biennale earlier this year. So both these, the two organizations are working to promote art and artists primarily in these two cities, much less so in the country. And then there are other initiatives that are funded by organizations like, say, Goethe Institute or Prince Claus Fund. And then they're just a handful of artist residencies, which are extremely helpful for artists to just be given that space, to be allowed the freedom to think and to create. But unfortunately, there are no film festivals. There used to be a fantastic film festival called Kara, which was discontinued for lack of funding, and it just has not been picked up again. So there are these kind of small attempts that people are making. And I mean, this year, everything sort of shifted online. So it was, so people started galleries started having talks, curators were doing talks, artists were taking to Instagram to kind of do these, have various forms of sharing through IG Live, and so on and so forth. So that's created some conversation. But yeah, so it's a very sparsely populated festival scene.
Well, great. Hajooj, Hira, thank you very much. I think it's been a really important reminder for all of us about very different contexts in which festival making happens and in which art making happens, and that all of our contexts are not the same. And we're constantly reminded of this at every online festival atelier that we do. But this has been really good for us hear from both of you. And so thank you for your presentation.